after they come for me, they gon' come for you. After they come for me, they gon' come for you. After they come for me, they gon' come for you. After they come for me, they gon' come for you. Cause after they come for me, they gon' come for you. Cause after they come for me, they gon' come for you. You think this hell won't come for you? Cause after they come for me, they gon' come for you. Cause after they come for me, they gon' come for you.
Hey there, welcome to That Dang Dad. My name is Phil. In the United States, we are galloping rapidly towards the holiday of Thanksgiving. If you're not from here, you can probably guess that this is a holiday based around gratitude for the blessings and loved ones in our lives. But this holiday also commemorates contact between the English colonizers and an indigenous group known as the Wampanoag in 1621. School kids learn about the Pilgrims and the Indians having a lovely feast together, but we know how European colonization actually turned out for the indigenous people across the continent. So while this is a time to cultivate gratitude and to make an effort to see the world with appreciative eyes, this is also a time where many contemplate the ongoing legacy of colonialism, the damage that it's done to people on the land, and it's a time where you might be hearing a certain term with more frequency: landback. Landback is one of those concepts that I started to pick up in bits and pieces as I started following global liberation movements. I think I first came into contact with it during the Dakota Access Pipeline protests near the Standing Rock Indian Reservation. I saw it spray painted on walls in the background of scenes in Reservation Dogs, and most recently I've heard it used in relation to the Palestinian liberation movement. I've also heard some people in leftist spaces express skepticism about the concept. Some people seem to think that landback was some kind of revenge movement. And while I was skeptical of the skepticism, I did have to admit I just didn't know very much about it. So what better time than the Thanksgiving season to start the education process? And what better way to learn than listening to two people for whom landback and decolonization are personal, vital projects?
Hey Phil, I'm LostFutures, he, him. I am many things. I'm Métis, who has like a lineage that traces back to the Beaver Cree of northern Alberta, like beside Fort McMurray. But on the other side, I have like Circassian roots, which basically means like my great grandfather originates from the Caucasus Mountains of Russia. I'm also part Syrian and Lebanese. So
Cool.
So basically there's like a tie-in between the Arabic and Circassian with the Indigenous here in Canada.
Aloha, I'm Chris. I am Native Hawaiian activist, educator. I also make video games as a part of my work, but it's also, I make games that are about the being a Native Hawaiian and also mostly from a left direction. And my pronouns are he, them, and yeah, depending on the time. I'm actually Mahu, which is a Native Hawaiian gender identity, so it's hard to translate into like Western. It doesn't really directly translate into any Western gender identity, so it's complicated. But anyways.
Now, this is obviously a huge topic. It's worthy of hours of video and mountains of books and years of conversations. I could not possibly do it full justice, but that's also not the goal of this video. My goal is to take this term that we are seeing and hearing and just like understand it at like a basic fundamental level. Like, what is it? What is landback?
Landback is a movement, in my opinion, is a resistance to the severing of ties, like connections, relations of Indigenous peoples that Europeans enacted in their invasion of Turtle Island, but also like many other colonial places. You'll find this idea of severance. Basically, before colonization, Indigenous people had deep relations to the land, to the plains, to plants, animals, trees, and any living being, right? And to put it in a simplified kind of terminology, everything was in relation to Indigenous people. Everything. The land they walked, the trees, the water, the rivers, the oceans, everything was used. Like it's what I'm saying is a very oversimplified kind of idea of it, but later on we'll get into books that do talk about it. But to kind of put it into perspective, what motivated and what put indigenous peoples in relation to all of these things is a mode of being in a circle. Like, if you imagine a circle, everything is interconnected, everything is in relation. And what severance does was to break the relations in that circle. You know, relations to the land, to the animals, to the plants. And this is because, as I theorize and try to put up my big words, but it's really simple, the Europeans operated in a mode of a triangle. And in this triangle, you have hierarchy, you have power, and you have, at the core of everything, apathy. What this does is basically extract resources, enact colonial and impressional policies, and basically teach other settlers of this apathy. The frontier, right, this land of wilderness, this huge, massive ocean of trees, basically became a distant place on a map, right? To Europeans, to colonialists, to white people, to descendants of the settlers. If you point out the wilderness to them, they'll just say, oh, that's where we get our trees from. Oh, that's where we get our iron from. Oh, that's where we get the uranium from. But this completely differs from how indigenous peoples view the land in their relation to it. And thus, landback, to me, like, to what it is returning that relation back to indigenous people.
Landback is a hashtag initially that was used by Native youth. I was trying to look up the exact place where it originated, but it was used by Native youth in a variety of different political actions, like stop fossil fuel pipelines, like the DAPL, and it was really like it was just kind of a rallying cry that we need to protect our land, need to make sure the United States and Canada stick to international law, to the treaties they've agreed to. From my perspective as a Native Hawaiian, like, landback is not about changing ownership of land, but in the long term, ultimately, it's about ending private ownership of land and people. Or land is Aina from a Native Hawaiian perspective. So Aina is your mother that you can't own in the way that you can't own your mother. It's difficult to explain that, I think, for people, for like Western conceptions of property and control, like real estate, like these involve, using land for personal profit and things that are bought and sold, right? And so a lot of landback is like a long-term process of changing human relationships to land. It's as part of like decolonization, which is like another word that is apparently illegal on Twitter now.
I know, right?
It's a process of trying to restore the relationships of people to land in a healthier way. Now, what exactly does that mean? That's where it becomes more complicated, right? So it's like, we're talking about full communism, but there's no ownership, and everyone is there's no private property anywhere. And the reality is, I don't think there is no real one simple answer. And if you ask two different Native people, you're gonna get slightly different answers. But it does begin, like a concrete way that landback does begin is with the United States, Canada, their businesses, the governments, nonprofit, U.S. military, Western militaries, following international law, respecting the treaties they've already agreed to. But they have a history of just walking all over Native people, right? So, landback begins with like at least like listening to the Native people and going, this is what we need. Like, we have, well water advisories all over Native. And we have in Hawaii, we have massive poverty. We have the highest homeless rate. Native Hawaiians, we're like 4 times more likely to be incarcerated. We have you're violating our you're violating international law in Mauna Kea. You're dropping jet fuel in our water. You're not following your own agreed to environmental policies. You're taking more land, letting Maui burn. Right? You're cutting off our water. Dry it off so that private sorts can have it. Landback is about stop doing that, basically. Right? It's decolonization is a process about please stop being horrible outside, right, to the 90% of the non-West, inside or non-colonial world, and then inside is about please stop just tracking everything and all the rules inside.
Because land back for Indigenous peoples means reclaiming their home, a home that has been lost, a home that has been dispossessed, a home that has been completely barred by settlers because of treaties and other land thefts throughout the years, right? And thus, what it means for Indigenous peoples, it means that there's a return to peace, a return to having that stable relation with the land, with the plants, with the animals, and with all of the land without Europeans and Euro-colonial American settlers walking in continuously trying to take that land. So land back is a resistance, and if we're looking at this as like a Palestinian case, land back is a resistance against violence. To take land from Indigenous peoples, you need violence. You need to suppress rights. You need to basically pacify the resistance, the people, and you need to break their spirits. So part of land back isn't just regaining the land, but it's regaining like your humanity.
As I was doing my own study, one thing that became clear is that land back and decolonization broadly aren't just slogans or fancy metaphors. In their paper, Decolonization is Not a Metaphor, Eve Tuck and K. Wayne Yang write, decolonization as metaphor turns decolonization into an empty signifier to be filled by any track towards liberation. In reality, the tracks walk all over land and people in settler contexts. Though the details are not fixed or agreed upon, in our view, decolonization in the settler colonial context must involve the repatriation of land simultaneous to the recognition of how land and relations to land have always been differently understood and enacted. And that is all of the land, and not just symbolically. Or, in short, land back really does mean giving the land back. As a white person and a settler in the eyes of decolonial thinkers, I have to be honest, some of these ideas were a little hard to swallow at first. So one thing that I wanted to understand is why somebody who was not Indigenous might also feel drawn to the land back movement beyond just pure saintly altruism.
Land back sounds frightening, right? When I first heard it before education, I was kind of frightened. I'm being honest here. I was like, what? They're gonna come here and kick me, a Arab immigrant, out of this land? Why? But what's been proven time and time again is that Indigenous peoples care for the land way better than any settler can ever. For people who are severed from Indigenous peoples, who are apathetic, who don't actually see them as visible people, and rather people on the margins who are just hidden away in the land and on the maps, and who are just, sometimes mentioned. For those people, I say you have to care about it because of the proven abilities of Indigenous peoples and how they care for the land, right? From an environmental standpoint, settlers have wrecked and destroyed lands. And there is no doubt, for us to actually fight the climate crisis, we have to intact land back for Indigenous peoples to basically restore what has been lost. I cite a book here. Okay, it's written by Stephanie Rutherford. It's a brand new book. It's called Villain, Vermin, Icon, Kin, Wolves, and the Making of Canada. What Rutherford basically proves in this book is that in BC, and really in all of America, Americans have went on like a crusade to kill wolves. Like, if there's one enemy Americans and Canadians have together, it's wolves. And they've killed thousands and thousands of wolves every single year. But what this relates to land back is that there's a portion in BC where they were like, okay, we're killing all these wolves every year. Like, legit, they get into helicopters and they bomb and they shoot these wolves. But at some point they were like, okay, we've killed enough wolves. It's not actually helping the caribou. What do we do? And what they did was give the land back to the indigenous peoples of that region. And what happened was something amazing, right? Because indigenous peoples don't kill wolves, and they don't just mass murder these things on an entirely new level. What they did was basically foster up the caribou population and the wolf population. And so what this should prove to people is that land back isn't just this frightening thing, but rather it helps the environment, it helps indigenous people come back to their land and to restore what has been lost. Because there is so much indigenous knowledge that's out there that helps the environment, that helps animals, that settlers don't get, right? The one solution settlers seem to love is just killing the wolves and hope that it will do something.
I mean, if you can't shoot a wolf from a helicopter, I mean, what's the point, right?
No, exactly.
Or, land back, which is, a more, I feel like colonization is a term that is basically what land back alludes to. So decolonization is like, it seems like we just move this land. It's not a colony anymore, and then it's fixed, right? That's not finally what it is, right? It's about undoing like 500 years of like, as I said, it's kind of like it's a sickness. It's like it's a social, spiritual, lifeway, economic, horrible system that has been in process. And even if you I wasn't for it, my great grandparents or great grandparents came to America. By participating in it, even if you didn't like it, you're still part of that greater system. Actually, a lot of people didn't like the ruling class of London and made the most money. In fact, there was poverty inside, but they were part of a global colonial capitalist system, one that was happening. So like anyway, so that's where it will impact all of the population, whether you're white or you're black but you identify as American, or you're indigenous or you're European. Even again, it goes beyond just somebody's land changing the title on this land from corporation X, individual X, right? So it's not about taking somebody's house. It's not what it's about. In fact, if the land back process, if the decolonization process continues, then housing will not get less available, will get cheaper and more available for native, for all people, non-native, native, people everywhere. And as an example, let me give you a specific example from Hawaii's history. So in Hawaii, prior to the United States occupation, which that's a long story, but and the illegal annexation, the United Nations calls it a fraudulent annexation and a illegal military occupation. That's technically what it is under the, again, international law, right? That's what we're talking about. So part of land back is respecting that. But prior to the United States occupation, Hawaii had the highest literacy rate in the world. It was 98%. It surpassed every European country, surpassed the United States by far. The world's first universal healthcare system, which was established in 1859 by Emma Kaleleo Nalani Na'earuk, who was a woman who believed that healthcare was a right. And so he went on foot in Hawaii, which had a very advanced country. Rapidly, it was the greatest mass education, the greatest mass increase in literacy rate in history, up until that point, certainly. And she lobbied for universal healthcare and got it. And so Hawaii had absolutely free healthcare. It was better than any Western, any Nordic or German model. Canadian healthcare, everything was basically free. And that was 100 years before any country in the West would even try it. So those are part of the items that were part of a pre-colonized, or think of that as that's land back existence. And it wasn't like only Hawaiians, the universal health care. Also, there's basically zero homelessness or near zero homelessness. It was a country that had electric lights before the White House, the Iolani Palace, that was our capital. We had hydro-powered, renewable, electrified cities. Honolulu and the 800 plus lights was all powered by turbines that were spun by the waterfalls in Hawaii nationalized. So there was no private electricity. So there were people suffering blackouts and exorbitant electricity rates. Hawaii had basically free electricity, renewable. The U.S. coup was backed by HECO, which is the Hawaiian Electric Company, which is white private capitalist plotters who wanted to overthrow Hawaii so that they could privatize the electricity. So anyway, long story short, why does landback matter for non-native people, right? If you want Medicare for all, 70+% of all Americans want. If you want affordable housing and basically no homelessness, right? Instead of paying $2,000 a month for a flat now that nobody can afford, if you want a future where the planet isn't destroyed, we had the renewable socialist society that's not based on profit. If you want universal healthcare, if you want to have a country that has rule of law, it should be the case that people can coexist, and people shouldn't have to feel bad that they live in a society that is run by criminals. Like, that's not a normal state of affairs. That wasn't the case in Hawaii. That doesn't mean there's no problems, but when there's corruption, right, that is causing problems, right? Like privatizing all the housing and then nobody can afford it, and there's a structure to fix it, and it gets fixed. And like there are places in the world that don't have those problems. They don't have those problems that like the U.S. and the West has. Like, I mean, Cuba is just one of them. They have a similar system to what Hawaii had. So it doesn't mean that like, oh, well, U.S. is going to look like Cuba today. No, that's not necessarily what it means. What it means is that U.S. is going to look much different than any, if it repairs these problems, it's going to look a lot different than any other place that has ever existed. I think that there is actually no solution for, housing or healthcare or environmental justice. Literally, even environmental scientists, they all like basically are unanimous. Indigenous, land management is the only thing that has prevented destruction of the lungs of the earth in the Amazon. Indigenous, people represent 25% of the carbon emissions reduction of the U.S. and Canada, wiping 2% to 4% of the population. It's literally like, it doesn't mean that like we're indigenous, a handful of native people are just going to save America. That's not what that means either. What that means is that again, it's the colonial capitalist structures, right? It's not like something in the DNA of people who are Caucasian. It's like those structures, those systems are proven to have failed, and like it has to be moved away from. People don't all have to like adopt Blackfoot or any indigenous particular tribes or nations economic and social policies, but it means that they have to start like learning from those societies and those nations that still have retained more functional systems.
In a detailed explanation of landback written by the Yellowhead Institute, the authors begin their conclusion with the following statement. The stakes of these struggles are immense. Of course, while indigenous land and life are the focus here, the life of our species and of the planet are at risk from the type of economic philosophy and practices perpetuated by colonialism and settler colonialism. I think that if you're somebody who leans left, you probably have no problem looking at the effects of capitalism all around the world and noticing that for the vast majority of people, shit's busted. This global system of extraction and exploitation seems on the surface to benefit the so-called middle class in the imperial core with access to cheap consumer goods. But even people with good jobs in the United States are one medical catastrophe away from bankruptcy. Corporations are consolidating power, fixing prices, buying governments, even hiring mercenaries. The abuse of the environment is causing catastrophic storms, flooding, heat waves, crop destruction. And anytime people try to protest against this failing status quo, even so-called liberal politicians send bloodthirsty cops to intimidate and assault the people. While landback and decolonization are their own thing and not simply alternative costumes for anti-capitalist critique, I think there's a lot of resonance between those movements and anyone who feels like something is wrong with the way that workers are exploited. that something is wrong with the way that our rivers are polluted and our forests are destroyed, that something is wrong with the way that unaccountable police and military units are used to beat compliance into the people. Let me say it like this. Our planet is heating up, and corporations are making moves to control our access to water for profit. And they are going to use cops to protect that profit. If that scares you, I have great news. Indigenous activists have been resisting the police to protect access to clean water for decades. But we owe them solidarity today, because what they're fighting today is what's coming for non-natives tomorrow. Now, I know some people are skeptical about landback as a concept, so one thing that I wanted to understand was whether that skepticism might stem from misconceptions about the movement.
Well, first of all, Indigenous peoples are probably one of the nicest peoples ever out there. They would never come up to your door like a cop and kick you out of your house because they're anti-cop.
Right.
What landback asks for is the right to is a return to the rights of Indigenous peoples, right? You have to acknowledge that you're settling on stolen land, and that by doing that, you're participating in a settler colonial state that bars Indigenous people's rights, right? And by participating in that system, and it's hard to take, it's hard to understand, it's hard to conceptualize because, you know, settlers love to deny stuff, but you're playing a role in the denial of rights. And so by giving land back, you're basically giving Indigenous peoples their rights to their land, and they have a decision to do with those who occupy that land. And 100% of the time, they will not kick you out. They will not come at you at your door with guns and force you out. Rather, it's going to be more like it's like living side by side to each other, having equal rights, having an equal place in that territory. So what would happen would be, if there's land that is sacred to Indigenous peoples, let's say there's a grove that houses Indigenous spirits and ancestors that is crucial to them, that will be taken back. And I could cite like the Oka crisis in 1990, where basically the Canadian state wanted to build a golf course on an Indigenous cemetery, and the Oka crisis began, where Mohawk warriors and women basically stood up. They were like, yeah, you cannot build a golf course on a cemetery that is very important to us and our ancestors. You just can't do that, right? And the same thing would happen here, I think. Maybe. I'm not 100%. But okay, let's actually, so it'd be like Oka, but rather it would be anything important to Indigenous peoples. Like, for an example, access to clean water, access to needs, access to, you know, basic life needs that they need to survive. Because Indigenous people still do care for the land, they still actively participate with the land, be it hunting, water collective, fishing, anything that is of necessity will be returned in the land back.
And I could see that, you know, as you study like environmental justice, and where I'm more familiar with it would be in places like Louisiana, where in traditionally black neighborhoods they build the big chemical plants that just pump poison into the air. You know, there's that kind of environmental justice aspect of it. So I could see in a land back scenario, you know, maybe we're not kicking families out of the land, but we're probably definitely kicking industry off of important rivers. We're kicking landfills out of, you know, places where that's damaging the land. I can see there being a sort of industrial sort of reckoning that would happen.
Yeah. And also, like, you have to think about the amount of oil pipelines that cross through Indigenous stories.
People who are worried that, like, you know, landback means if corporation X is going to, because there's many, I know that's everywhere. That kind of propaganda is everywhere. These native people are going to take all your land and be your landlord. That's not what it means. People don't all have to, like, adopt Blackfoot or any indigenous particular tribes or nations economic and social policies, but it means that they have to start, like, learning from those societies and those nations that still have retained more functional systems, and then and help those people at least keep surviving, and then they can benefit from the process of adjusting, because there's not unfortunately there's not a lot of roadmap inside of America, inside of the West, because of just ubiquitous, right, the colonial capitalist destructive structures have been. So and so that's and finally, like, I think that's what really landback is trying to and the greater context decolonization is trying to accomplish. And so I know it's a long way to explain what that means, but I mean, it just in short, the TLDR is landback doesn't mean take your house. Well, I mean, a good parallel is people talking, because right now, right, Israel and Palestine is a big topic. It's not identical, but it's the same things that are involved in that. And one misconception people have about that is where all the Jews go if Palestine is free from the river to the sea. It's the same kind of misconception. It's intentionally installed into the minds of people in the collective West, right, for the purposes of continued colonialism and imperialism, etc., which is that the Jews all have to be kicked out of Palestine. But that's not true, right? The Palestinians don't want that. The Palestinians want the end of the colonial occupation of Israel, which is manufactured like Hawaii, very much like Hawaii. Israel in Palestine is very much like the United States in Hawaii. It's a completely fabricated lie that's been installed, and everyone has been brainwashed by having a bigger speaker for a century, in Israel case since late 40s. Right? So, people discovering online suddenly, right? Oh my God, there's all these maps of Palestine. Palestine is referred to by Shakespeare. What? There's always been a Palestine? Israel? It's all a lie. It's like the meme with the astronauts, right?
Yeah,
so,
right.
like. Right, and it's like, and so that's a misconception. That is a misconception that it's anti-Semitic to, right, about try to support the Palestinian people. And it's like, no, that's a misconception, because the racist, unjust occupation, the same thing, right? What do Palestinians want? They want to not live in a toxic ghetto, unable to move, with no airports, no food, no water, and having the children being bombed. I mean, it's more extreme, because the difference between Hawaii or Native people in Turtle Island or in North America and Palestine is that the U.S. isn't bombing thousands of children in Hawaii right now. They bomb around us. That's literally the comparison I will make, right? Hawaii is very much like Palestine. Except the bombs are dropped like 30 miles. I'm 30 miles from where I am. They bomb. They don't bomb on top of us, But it's more extreme. But the political reality is similar, and that's a misconception that so many people have, which is that the United States is, right, its goal is to eliminate the Hawaiian, not to physically get rid of every single person who has any Hawaiian blood. It's about eliminating the people who want a Hawaiian nation, who want the Hawaiian people and the Hawaiian people who want to recognize and try to right the wrongs, right, that I talked about from the 1890s. They want all those people gone. That's why they just want Hawaiians to just be another American with like 25% of this interesting little party. You can discuss your Hawaiianness for 5 seconds at a party. That's it. Anything more than that, we're coming down on you. So in Palestine, Israel wants all of the Palestinians gone, right? Obviously, the current government just wants to annihilate them all, ethnically cleanse them all, nightmarishly. So it's just a more extreme version of that. So that's the misconception that if all people, Muslim, Jew, and Christian, could coexist, again, their human rights be respected, their economic rights be respected, their environment, please stop destroying the environment, like pouring concrete into water in the wells and bombing cornfields so they can't grow corn. The rainwater is owned by Israel and Palestine. If you could stop doing those, the olive trees, 300 olive trees were planted by Native Hawaiians in Palestine. We have many exchanges. They were on Mauna Kea as well. People don't realize this. The Palestinian flag was flying on Mauna Kea, right? Because we're in the same struggle. And so if they could simply stop, if Israel would stop with massive apartheid, human rights violations, have to stop these crimes against humanity against us, atrocities, you have to just simply stop doing that. Because of course, the Jewish people who are in Israel, they need a place to be. And like before the creation of Israel, they could continue to be there in peace. And so similarly, obviously the United States, they didn't have Europeans before that, but that doesn't mean that, doesn't mean that in the same way that Free Palestine doesn't mean people have to go somewhere else. Just in the United States, landback doesn't mean all the Europeans have to go somewhere else. Simply have to all respect human rights of all the people there, and that includes obviously for the black population. It's not necessarily land back, because they're in a different position that but it's the same deal with the racism. It's a similar thing, right? If simply there could not be massive unjust police arrests, brutality, horrible differentials in economic outcomes, black people not able to get loans and jobs, and these, if there could actually be equality, right, then that is part of that whole process, right? That would be considered part of landback.
It should be noted, though, that removing misconceptions can only go so far, and that decolonization is always going to be a struggle for white settlers to vibe with, because it demands a total restructuring of everything. And some aspects of decolonization are always going to be unique, with no comfortable analogy in other social justice movements. Tuck and Yang call this incommensurability, and they talk about it in the conclusion of their paper. An ethic of incommensurability which guides moves that unsettle innocence stands in contrast to aims of reconciliation, which motivate settler moves to innocence. Reconciliation is about rescuing settler normalcy, about rescuing a settler future. Reconciliation is concerned with questions of what will decolonization look like, what will happen after abolition, what will be the consequences of decolonization for the settler. Incommensurability acknowledges that these questions need not, and perhaps cannot, be answered in order for decolonization to exist as a framework. We want to say, first, that decolonization is not obliged to answer these questions. Decolonization is not accountable to settlers or to settler futurity. Decolonization is accountable to indigenous sovereignty and futurity. Still, we acknowledge the questions of those wary participants in Occupy Oakland and other settlers who want to know what decolonization will require of them. The answers are not fully in view and can't be as long as decolonization remains punctuated by metaphor. The answers will not emerge from friendly understanding, and indeed require a dangerous understanding of uncommonality that uncoalesces coalition politics, moves that may feel very unfriendly. But we will find out the answers as we get there, in the exact measure that we can discern the movements which give decolonization historical form and content. So, if you're a settler like me waiting around for a version of decolonization that is meticulously outlined for your approval and doesn't feel scary or uncertain, you're going to be waiting for a long time. There won't be certainty, but that doesn't mean that there can't be solidarity.
Okay, I want you all to remember that landback isn't us indigenous peoples coming after you and killing you. Rather, the landback movement is quite peaceful, and we are not, I stress this, we are not going to kill you, so don't have nightmares of me in your dreams.
I think the main thing I want people to remember is that landback will benefit everyone. It will benefit the environment. It will help you, as I said, times in economically, in terms of your housing, in terms of healthcare, your ability to get your needs met, and also it will help you in, like as I kind of said, that spiritual dimension. You won't have to constantly have this cloud over your head of what is my country and where is my living and my house and my food all coming from. You have to worry about, there's this great injustice underlying all things, right? Kind of the way that we're discovering Palestine. So, yeah, and it's not just, landback is not one thing. It's not just about land, again, changing hands, but it's about people changing their conceptions of human relationships to land and also to other people.
Anyway, I want to thank Lost Futures and Silver Spook for taking the time to talk to me about this stuff. I think 2023 in particular has shown us that not only is the age of colonialism not dead, The soul sickness of colonialism is destroying land and lives every day still. From the US military polluting Hawaiian waters, to Canadian violence against Indigenous activists, to Israel's ongoing ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. And I think the most important thing you can do is to seek out Indigenous artists and activists and thinkers and creators and listen to them. Listen to their stories, listen to their needs, and then either pitch in to meet those needs or at least amplify them. You can start by following my friends from this video.
Yeah. Okay, I have a channel called LostFutures. It's great. It's wonderful. I'm super gentle and nice, and I get like lovely comments every single day telling me how great I am. So if you want to follow me there it is.
Well, you gotta tell them what you talk about a lot on your channel.
Oh,
you have a niche.
Fine.
You have a niche on your channel.
I don't know if I have a niche. I'm trying to pivot away from that niche.
Oh,
man.
okay. You don't have a niche. You're branching out. Never mind.
Okay, so my channel basically focuses on oppression. It focuses on oppressed liberation movements and Indigenous peoples, with the twist that I focus on anime analysis and integrate it into leftist/communist kind of theories and academic books.
You can follow me at Silver Spook on Twitter. That's where I do a lot of the most political action education, and then and then you can follow on Instagram Silver Spook. Also have a YouTube channel. It's the Silver Spook YouTube channel. Pretty sure that's what it's called. I also make video games. That's like my main not my main job, but that's one of the jobs I spend most time on, is making games under Silver Spook Games, and Neofeud, which is on Steam, and itch.io is the flagship game, and I'm almost done with the second one.
Cool.
Yeah.
I have played Neofeud, and if you're a fan of point and click adventures like old school, that's the kinds of games I grew up on. I think it's great, and I think anybody that watches my channel would vibe on it big time. So it's a great game. So excited to hear the sequel is coming.
Awesome. Thanks for picking up and playing it. Very close to being done. I wish I was done like 2 years ago, but
don't stop there. Keep going. Indigenous people are not a monolith. And decolonization can take many forms or have different focuses depending on who's talking about it. And it's important to hear from as many voices as you can.
One of the best I have to cite is Stephanie Rutherford. The Wolf Book is what I call it, is what our class calls it. But basically, Rutherford gets into everything about relationality. She doesn't hold back when talking about landback. She doesn't hold back when talking about what exactly do wolves, plants, trees, rivers, oceans mean to Indigenous peoples. And then you have Elizabeth Penashue's book, I Keep the Land Alive. And it's basically like a book with pictures in it. It's beautiful, right? And it's basically her diary of her connection to the land, and how basically every single day and year she walks through the land in protest against Canadian armed forces, who basically built it's like a UN jet Air Force military base.
Okay.
It was basically built to practice for the Yugoslavia war. Yeah, so they built a huge military base up there in northern Newfoundland because they thought, hey, look, this is the corner of our country. Nobody lives here. Yeah. It's the wilderness. This is a perfect place for a jet military base, because the get this, the terrain in Newfoundland looks just like the terrain in Yugoslavia. That was their logic. So they basically started flying like low flying jets over these people, like super low, near the trees, blasting their ears.
Yeah.
And so in protest to it, she basically started walking and organizing protests against this military base, because not only did it bring jets to their land, but it also brought contaminations that came from the weapons and other manufacturers. And so her book is a very personal, very diary-like book that talks about landback and relationality, and also throws shade against the church, because the church has such a prominent role in colonizing Indigenous peoples.
What pops into my head immediately is The Red Deal is a book by several Indigenous authors, and especially if you're coming from a more of a left, direction, you kind of like not a native person, but you're more on the left edge of the spectrum. It is geared towards that group of people. Want to understand what landback and what all of these things we're talking about means.
Did you say the Red Deal?
It's called The Red Deal. Okay. It's the Red Deal, and it's by the Red Deal is by Common Notions Press. One activist, I believe that was part of that, also has the Red Nation podcast. If people haven't heard of that, if you like podcasts, Red Nation podcast is one source. They have several folks that work with them, and Nick Estes is, I think he was one of the authors of the Red Deal, if I'm not mistaken. And so that's a good source, particularly from like a North American Indigenous person perspective. Obviously, I'm Native Hawaiian, so we have our own perspectives. Let's see, who else was there? Red Deal, Red Nation. If you're like want to get more information about Hawaiian landback decolonization actions, kind of thing, Aina, here, I'll write it down for you. It is called Aina Momona, which is a Instagram account, but they are like a larger organization. A lot of the like current actions on Maui after the fires, trying to practice landback and making sure that the way it's restored is as decolonized as possible. Aina Momona is a organization that is like leading in a lot of that, especially in the communicating to the wider world. And they're led by Walt. Well, one of their founders is Walter Riddy. I'll write that down for you. Walter Riddy is a longtime Hawaiian activist. He's been in this. He went to Vietnam and he came back, and that radicalized him as a Native Hawaiian. He was basically pushed there, and he came back and he fought on Kaho'olawe to stop the U.S. bombing one of our islands, basically oblivion. And then he's fought in like on the lines on Mauna Kea. He's been at Red Hill. He's been everywhere. He's currently they're trying to restore Molokai, which is one of our islands. So Walter Riddy and his Red Nation, Aina Momona. There's so many.
Anyway, there you go. A woefully short primer for dum-dums like me about landback. Did you learn anything new? Did this clear up any misconceptions for you? Let us know down in the comments. Anyway, I really appreciate you joining me tonight. If you thought this was a helpful video, please leave a like. That does help visibility. And please share this video with somebody that you think might be interested. And I say unto you one last time, don't stop with me. Keep searching. Keep learning. All right, enough said. Catch you on the next one. Have a good night.
Cause after they come for me, they gon' come for you. Cause after they come for me, they gon' come for you. You think this hell won't come for you? Cause after they come for me, they gon' come for you. Cause after they come for me, they gon' come for you. Cause after they come for me, they gon' come for you.